Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? All right, we're looking today at a comic I think you could safely call a cult book, but a cult book along the lines of something like The Cube, in that it's a solid sci-fi story that I think has gained a steady fan base over the years. We're looking today at Alien Legion #1. So this is the French Foreign Legion in space. All sorts of soldiers been recruited from all sorts of worlds to fight for the one galactic, whoever, empire, something like that. This is one of those books I remember actually seeing a copy of in like after school programs when I was like 7. And I remember seeing this and thinking this was the best drawn thing I'd ever seen, I think. You know, having picked it up again a couple of years ago, I don't think I'd go quite that far, but it is a very nice looking book. The whole deal with this is Carl Potts' baby, I believe. Carl Potts had been working primarily as an editor at Marvel and brought them this idea that he'd been working on for a couple of years. Ran it by Jim Shooter. Jim Shooter at first okayed it to be published as a straight-up Marvel property, but then I think thought better of it and thought that Epic Comics would be kind of a more appropriate home for it. I think that's about right. It does sound as though Jim Shooter did want Carl Potts to get in on some of the royalties that were popping up around this time at Marvel. But this is going to be a war comic, and I mean, it's the kind of subject matter that, yeah, you could do as a straight Marvel title. I mean, in a couple of years from now, they'll have Nam, which will be pretty much that. But you might want to try publishing that through Epic as a direct market title and see about exploring some slightly more mature subject matter. In addition to that, Carl Potts would retain creator control. I believe he also retains creator ownership, at least in part. Probably not in the credits here. Oh, wait, you know what? Alien Legion TM and the distinctive likenesses thereof are the trademarks of Carl Potts. So that was that was baked into the bread. So that's very interesting because, yeah, that definitely wouldn't have been a part of the contract if he had decided to publish this through the standard Marvel contract. So either Carl Potts hearing that there was this new publishing venture where he could retain the rights to his characters, or maybe even Jim Shooter looking out for Carl Potts going, you know what, you might want to publish this after Marvel decides, that they're probably done with it, which will be inside of, like 2-3 years. It's thoroughly possible. The whole reason that royalties exist at Marvel is because Jim Shooter fought for them back in the day. So anyway, why don't we get into this? We can start with the cover here. That is a really nice cover. Like, I really like this. This is going to be drawn by Frank Sirocco, who's a name I'm not familiar with. He hasn't done a whole lot in comics, really. Apart from Alien Legion, I would say. He got his start in comics as a Krusty Bunker, which is essentially Knob Row for Neil Adams back in the 70s. So the beginning stages of these studio working conditions that Neil Adams would eventually evolve into continuity comics, essentially. From there, he focused on commercial art and illustration before starting to work his way back into comics. But this is the first time, I believe, that Frank Sirocco is getting a shot at being a dedicated penciler. And it's a hell of a shot he's taken. Like, the design he's getting here is fantastic with, the central character here with all the guys. These are all just soldiers in the Alien Legion in this particular unit that are going to be featured in this particular story. And we've got the captain in the background here. I always assumed the captain was a villain. I didn't understand what was going on when I would try to read this comic when I was 7. It's just way too technical for me at that time. But, he kind of looks like a villain. He's all colored darker than the rest of these guys here. Like, that guy, yeah, he's kind of an alien-looking dude, but he's not like a scary alien or anything. That guy, yeah, no, he's maybe a scary alien. I think bad guy. He's not, of course. He's the captain of the unit, actually. And he's a nice design element all on his own. But yeah, no, beautifully designed cover here. I love this quite a bit. So we got an interesting start to this. We got a cover page here saying, foot sloggers and soldiers of fortune, priests and poets, killers and cads, they fight for a future galarchy, for cash, a cause, for the thrill of adventure. Legionnaires live rough and they die hard, tough as tungsten and loyal to the dirty end. That's a pretty good description right there. And then we get like file cards. I think this is probably one of the big reasons I liked this when I was a kid. These things I would love to draw all day. But we got to break down on, our different characters in this particular platoon. So this is Montrock. He's like second in command for the unit. Joined the Legion at the insistence of his wealthy and aristocratic father, who demanded to see his son develop into a real man before legally awarding him patrimonial credits, which would assure him a life of luxury. Which I believe is kind of the deal Christopher Lee did. And by Christopher Lee, I mean the guy who played, Saruman and Dracula back in the 50s. And just about 200 other friggin' parts. Yeah, if you're not familiar, go check out his Wikipedia page, because it's a little fucking crazy. So we've also got Saragar. He's the captain of the platoon, descends from ancient slave stock, genetically engineered to meet the stringencies of a heavy gravity environment, as reflected in thicker bones and less fat in the upper torso than comparable humanoids, and a muscular saurian caudal appendage. So, I mean, this isn't really the ideal way to start a comic, I don't think, but at the same time, we've got a bunch of guys who are going to be a little bit tough to differentiate from each other because they're all in this kind of uniform, even though, you know, there are some differences in terms of, you know, like this guy has 4 arms. You know, this guy, he's more of a, just kind of a tree stump of a man. There's obviously the snake guy, but having this stuff at the beginning does make it, you know, for some people, it makes it a little bit easier to differentiate who your characters are, and it's nice to have this to kind of flip back to. Okay, so I don't know who's a fan favorite, so I should just also name drop the rest, I guess. There's Dirge, there's Grimrod, that's a pretty good name, Miko, and Torka Dunn, who seems like a soldier of fortune type. All right, so we're going to start out with our alien legion. They're in their spacecraft here, and they're retreating, but they're getting chased down by the Harkalons. So the Harkalons are some sort of empire that are against the Galarchy. Was that the word? Is it the Galarchy? Okay. As in galactic monarchy, yes. So the Legion are just kind of rolling through, yeah, and they get bombed up, and it gets to the point where their ship is going to be destroyed, so they have to launch a couple of escape pods here. Interesting first page here, like just going with a slightly minimalist design. You know, we're cutting out a whole bunch of negative space here, and also perching our 2 characters here in the middle of it. We're also popping the ship out from beyond the panel border. We're tilting the panel quite a bit. Like, these are some bold choices for a guy who hasn't established himself as a regular in comics at this point, and I don't think really would. He's pulling them off, though. It's not like it's not working. So, yeah, a couple of platoons load up in the shuttles, and they're going to take off. And, yeah, the captain and his navigator, they're going to stay on the ship and see if they can take down a couple of Harkalons before they get destroyed. So, kind of a going down with the ship situation. All right, so the first group we're going to cut to isn't the group we've been introduced to, which is a bit confusing. Again, you got all these guys who look kind of similar, again, with all the armor, and you spend all these pages at the beginning introducing a specific number of the Legionnaires, and then, okay, here we go into the action, and it's a different group of Legionnaires entirely. But there's a reason for that. So they touch down on the planet's surface, and, you know, they're pushing their way out of their pod. They're going to do a little bit of exploring, when all of a sudden they get confronted by some pirates. So this is a known element in this part of the galaxy. Pirates run amok in this sector, on this planet. I'm not 100% for sure. And the Legionnaires are at a strict disadvantage because they don't have like weapons for war on them. They've got these dart launchers because they seem to be operating under some kind of prime directive type of command where they've only been issued weapons that won't cause any kind of ecological disturbance. It seems that the Galarchy's prime interest in the planet that they're on is that it is the home of these somewhat intelligent primates. And they want to be sure that they're able to develop without any interference from the Harkalons, because apparently the Harkalons would interfere. So the Legion gets stuck with their dart guns while the pirates, you know, they don't have a prime directive, so they're okay with just using whatever guns they can find. And while the Legion might be tough sons of bitches, you know, with superior firepower, they do get cut down pretty quickly here and wiped out to a man. Again, interesting choices for the page designs. Whole lot of negative space being used here. It's not as though he really is looking to avoid doing backgrounds, I don't think. Well, maybe he is to an extent. But for the most part, it just looks design influence. Like stuff like this. Because I know he has like a fantasy illustration background. And this is the kind of drawing that would fit in. You know, like the foot of a page or something. In a fantasy book. So it is interesting because he's having to do, you know, sequential storytelling, which is something I'm sure familiar with. You know, obviously he's read comics before this and he's worked with comic creators before this. Like he worked with fucking Neil Adams. But, you know, knowing the tools in theory and actually putting them into practice, those can be 2 separate things. So he does an okay job with the storytelling. And then, yeah, every once in a while it seems like he wants to show off the skills he has developed. And it honestly, it ends up looking kind of striking, and it gives the book its own look. There's parts of this that remind me a little bit of Atari Force. I mean, you know, it does have that same kind of sci-fi adventure feel. But, you know, some of the elements that Frank Sirocco is using are some of the things that Luis Garcia Lopez was also using on Atari Force. It's just that, Garcia Lopez tends to use all of the techniques on Atari Force, and he does them extremely fucking well. I'm starting to think maybe I should look at Atari Force number 3 sometime soon. Anyway, the unit gets wiped out. So from there, we're going to cut back to the Auron Galaxy, seat of government for the Tofan Galactic Union. There is a lot of jargon in this comic, which can tend to make your eyes glaze over after a while. It's the danger with any sci-fi comic, or movie, or novel for that matter, is that if you start throwing too much jargon around without context, you start to dissociate the reader. Unless you can make it really involving, or catch their attention in some other way, which comics can through the artwork. Some people are willing to stick around because the artwork looks interesting, and maybe eventually they'll get acclimated and, just be stuck in the moment, and they'll be fine. And they can look back on those old issues eventually and go, oh, this is what they were talking about with all this jargon. So this is the Alien Legion reporting to some of the stellar representatives and ranking members of the Siderium Committee on Ecological Affairs. So they're having to report that they got attacked by the Harkalons. They don't know why, and they know that the ship launched a couple of shuttles, but they haven't been able to contact them. So now we're going to touch on the guys that we did meet at the beginning of the book. And we're going to take our time kind of getting to know everybody, and they get a little bit of rapport back and forth while, we're looking for the other shuttlecraft, which they do eventually stumble upon, and they find, of course, that everybody's dead, including Lieutenant Burke, who I think was commanding that particular platoon. So, Mondrock here, he's lieutenant for this platoon, so as I said, second in command. They can't find the captain just yet, so he's gathering everybody up, and they're going to go searching for him. In the meantime, some of the guys in the platoon are starting to get into a fight, because I guess that's bound to happen when you got all sorts of differing alien species. So the frog-looking guy here in particular, seems like he gets picked on a lot. So this guy's talking about how he's going to beat the shit out of him. Frog guy's thinking to himself how nobody ever comes to his aid. It was a mistake to join the Legion. I should have just taken a prison sentence. So I'm guessing enlistment in the Legion is sometimes offered as an alternative to a prison sentence. And that's when the Captain Saragar moves to the crowd and just kind of smacks the ground, and I guess that gets everybody's attention. Looks like he was supposed to say some stuff here, maybe saying a few things. But it looks as though, I don't know, there was maybe some kind of miscommunication there between the artist and the writer. So the captain's going to whip these guys into shape. We get the feeling, we had the file card at the beginning to give us a little bit of an idea what his personality was like, but he's a by-the-books kind of captain. Very practical, very pragmatic, prefers there to be order at all time and for there to be a clear chain of command. And the lieutenant here, he's going to play good cop, essentially, where he's like, okay, you guys keep your noses clean for a couple of days, and we'll see about making sure that your little tussle here doesn't go on your service data. Okay, so from there, we're going to cut to the pirates. So they're involved in some kind of mining operation. This is their leader here, Prin, and he's getting on his workers' case about doubling some mining production that's going on the planet's surface. They tell him basically that if they do that, that's going to fuck up the procedure and it's going to make it so that the mine is unusable. And he doesn't give a shit. He's like, I don't care. Double the lunches anyway, or, there'll be hell to pay. And this is one of those somewhat intelligent primates. That is one of the natives to the planet. Again, all sorts of interesting page design stuff going on. He keeps doing this where he pops guys out against negative space and, extends them beyond panel borders, all that stuff. He likes using some long diagonal panels as well. But yeah, once you see this, that he keeps doing this where it's like mid-book illustrations, it's a little hard to unsee that this is like one of his primary tricks that he's got. It's a good one, and he knows how to execute it well. All right, so back to our Legion platoon. They're night marching, trying to catch up with the pirates that ambushed the other platoon. Great use of shadows to indicate the night march. We're getting like a nice silhouette to set the tone here, but then when we do the close-up, just deepen shadows on everybody. Everything that can be black on the uniform, you black that shit up. Looks great. I don't always like the color in this particular comic, I will say, because they're not using a standard 4-color system, or if they are using the Dr. Martens, they're not using the usual method of transferring those, where it does tend to look more watercolory. Sometimes it works okay, sometimes it doesn't, but it does mean every once in a while you get some very nice, like this is a really nice magenta that they get going here, which, maybe you get in a standard comic, maybe you don't. One thing about Epic, they do have the higher quality paper. This isn't like the cheap newsprint. This is getting printed on. So the colors are able to come out a bit more vibrant. I wish this was the stuff that Marvel printed their facsimiles on. I gotta say, because I hate the treatment they use, where they use the glossy paper, because it never meshes well with the colors. It always looks like fucking puke. Anyway, that's a few tangents there. They are able to find the headquarters for the pirates. The captain comes up. He's able to incapacitate the first guard here fairly easily. But there are a couple of other guards that are nearby, which spot him because he's not as sneaky as he thinks he is. So they jar loose some rocks from the hillside here, and when the rocks fall, he bats them at the guys. And I guess that distracts him long enough for him to hit them with the darts. Okay, whatever. It feels like there's cleverer things you could have come up with for that, but, whatever, who cares? So anyway, the captain's able to clear out the one side of the hideout here, so he can bring down his forces to help reinforce the area. Then they're going to move around to one of the doors and start picking off the guards there as well. And that alerts more guys inside, but they've got their full force here so they can mount an offensive. There's a bit here where the two guys who were fighting earlier, one of them, the frog guy, gets knocked unconscious, and the other one has to decide what to do with him. He decides to save him. Says he's not leaving a live legionnaire lying around for target practice. So yeah, just picks him up, dumps him by some barrels, and then runs back to the action and hopes nobody noticed that he saved that guy. Okay, so the firefight's still going on. They're still using their dark guns. And as you can see, they keep pinging dudes off, so they're better shots than these pirates are. But the lieutenant's gun runs out of ammo, so he has to tackle one guy, just barehanded. Manages to knock him out, looks back at the guy he was just hanging with, and realizes he's about to get snuck up on. He doesn't have a weapon except for this pirate's laser pistol, so it's against the rules, but he picks up the laser pistol. He does make a big deal about picking up the laser pistol, like, oh man, this is so against rules, but I'm such a good guy, I gotta pick up the laser and save the guy. And the guy he saved is like, I'm glad I'm in your unit tonight. I'm not sure Saragar would have flexed the rules to make that save, thank you. And just some more stuff with the firefight, but some nice panel choices. We got that leader guy for the pirates. I don't remember his name anymore, but it'll come up again. But yeah, nice choices. I like this panel here. We got a little bit of a Dutch angle, a little bit of a long shot, and we're getting some pretty dramatic lighting going on. That's good stuff. I believe this one was Grimrod, and he was one of the guys who got highlighted at the beginning, so we are going to try and focus in a little bit on those. This was another one of those. I think that was Miko, and he's the unit doctor, who's had like his family and potentially everybody on his planet wiped out, so he's kind of a pacifist. He's the anti-Lobo, I suppose. So, okay, Grimrod here does Garrett, one of the pirates here, just like slice his throat by the looks of it. He's got some red blood going on and everything. In 1984. It's epic, but still, that's a bit more than I would have expected for a book that has been, I'd say, fairly PG up until now. Even then, they're not showing it too clearly, just letting us know that this Grimrod guy, I guess, he's got a little bit of a violent streak to him, which, part of the deal with this comic is going to be seeking out sort of morally gray subject matter. I don't know how successful they're going to be at it because I haven't read any more issues of this other than issue 1. And the first run of this comic goes for 18 issues, which is like, that could be a short run, that could have been gotten a little bit of leeway. I'm not entirely for sure. It's kind of in a midpoint. But given the fact that Alien Legion keeps kind of coming back over the years, I assume that Carl Potts and Alan Zelenitz, he's the other guy doing the scripting, which I didn't mention at the beginning. I assume they are able to at least partially pull off the tone that they're going for. And another thing about this comic is that it has a tradition of having very good artists on it, from Frank Sirocco. And from there, you move on to Chris Warner, who we last saw on Terminator #1. Chris Warner is extremely good as well. And then after that, you get a young Larry Stroman working on Alien Legion. So, the first run, at least, of this title always had a quality artist on it. Anyway, we should get back to this. Grimrod here discovers a bunch of bombs that look like they have been initiated. So they're going to blow regardless. He doesn't seem to be able to find a way to disengage them. So instead, what he's going to do is he's going to set them up along this pipeline here because might as well, instead of just having them blow up on their own. All right, different part of the facility where Saragar and Miko and probably a couple of other Legionnaires are wrapping up, clearing out, the mine section. Miko starts to get sort of psychic twinges that somebody else is in here. So they're going to hide while pirates roll in. And, not a whole lot of dialogue going on here, but, this is just the captain, again, taking care of business. Hides up above the ship that they came in on by the looks of it. then starts picking them off one by one until they start to notice that their numbers are dwindling, and then he gets a bit more forceful. But yeah, he's able to take out the first wave pretty much by himself, and then the rest of the little group that he's got, they move into the headquarters proper and start taking out more of those pirates. They're just taking out a whole bunch of pirates in this comic. You know, they take out a couple here, but, you know, they're not trying to kill everybody. They're just knocking them out. Again, there's large parts of this book that feel PG. And then this Grimrod guy, where he slices the guy's throat, he's like, what was it the prison neuranalyst was always calling me? Oh yeah, a young psychopath. That's it. Captain's doing things by the numbers. They take the prisoners, and that mercenary guy, Captain orders him to collapse the supports in the mine shaft. So that'll end the pirate operation without the use of a lot of explosives, which would be, you know, preferable. It looks like at another part of the camp, pirate reinforcements have managed to show up, but they get cavalried by more of the Legion. So sure, I guess that happened. You know, again, nice choices. Like, this is a really nice, like, classy looking book. Here's another one of those, you know, bottom of the page shots. I am enjoying these quite a bit. All right, so it looks like we're pretty much wrapping up the whole conflict here. The platoon is starting to reform when all of a sudden that catapult for the mine blows up. And Grimrod's going to get chewed out by the captain. He's like, hey, look, the explosion was going to go off. I just kind of changed where it was going to go off. All right, so then moments later, we've got another headquarters. I don't know, maybe this is more of a... So I guess the first one was more of just like the headquarters for like the main facility for the mine, while this is more of an office that the leadership element of the pirates operates out of, maybe. I mean, that seems as likely as anything. So anyway, the leader of the pirates gets snuck up on by that mercenary guy. Gets stabbed right in his catcher's pads. He's able to shrug him off after that, but the pain is causing him to... Apparently, he's got a disguise going on that he's holding telepathically. So he has to let that slip, and that reveals him to be a member of the Harkalon Imperium, which are the bad guys who shot down the legionary ship at the beginning of the comic. This is our first time seeing them, so... It's maybe, I don't know if it's the shock it's meant to be, other than the fact that it's a weird looking alien, like a bit more weird looking than most of the other aliens in this comic. And he's holding that guy hostage, but one of those primates that's, you know, native to the planet manages to find a laser and shoot him down. Barely seems to know what he's doing, but, you know, is able to pull it off. Captain shoots him with the dart gun after that and incapacitates him. So now we're just wrapping up. They're trying to figure out exactly what the pirate leader's role in all this was, whether this was an operation that was working for the Harkalons, like if there was some sort of covert operation, or if he was just working on his own and he was like just trying to get some extra money going on the side. Doesn't really seem to matter too much for now, though. There is a guy from that platoon that got ambushed at the beginning of the comic who is still missing, and I think the lieutenant here knows him, so they're probably going to want to chase him down for issue 2. But they've been able to secure the autonomy of the primates, or, I mean, maybe they're more like Cro-Magnons, something like that. They've eliminated the piracy problem on this planet, or, you know, at least in this particular small area. And yeah, they're going to go head home and report in for more orders, and that's the end of issue 1. Get a little bit of background on everybody here. That's good shit. Get Steve Englehart's Coyote, as well as Jim Starlin's Dreadstar. An interesting story about Carl Potts. Apparently, when he was first starting out, one of the first things he worked on was with Jim Starlin. And he told Jim Starlin how he was thinking about moving to New York. Jim Starlin's like, okay, let me see if I can find something that'll help you out here. And so he calls up Al Milgram and Walt Simonson, who were apparently roommates at the time. And he's like, yo, I know a guy. He's an all right guy. Can he crash with you for a little bit until he gets his feet under him? And apparently this was the same building where Bernie Wrightson and Howard Chaykin were also living at the time. So all these guys are just kind of hanging out all the time and doing comic shit, which seems amazing to me. So anyway, yeah, that's another tangent. But that's Alien Legion number 1. It's pretty good. It looks great. I will say that. Again, the colors don't always do it for me, but, you know, because they tend to look a little bit washed out. But for the most part, they can keep up with the artwork, which is, I think, very nice. You know, there's a real stylishness to it that I appreciate. The story it's okay, but it's a bit of a throwaway mission, really. You know, just to kind of get our characters into some action so that you can see them at work and see their personalities going, right? So I wouldn't say I'm invested in it just yet. Like, it doesn't grab me like that, but the quality of the book is still high enough. I definitely pick up another copy. I don't know if I would have at the time. 225 Canadian. That's a little rough. In 1980, well, I mean, 1984, I would have been like 5 years old. But so I don't think I had an allowance at that point. It's kind of a moot point. But yeah, that is the bet that Marvel is making. That direct market books with a higher cost per unit will become its own little cash cow, even if it's kind of a small cash cow. You know, Amazing Spider-Man number 250 is coming out around this time. That's on sale for 60 cents. So this is more than 3 times the cover price of your standard comic at that time. That is, like, if you can get a few of these on the shelves and you can sell them regularly, that's potentially huge financially. So yeah, it's an interesting experiment that Marvel was doing at this time. I'd like to say it's surprising that they kind of just let it go, you know, with all the potential for growth that there was there, but it's Marvel. It's not all that surprising. Marvel likes to stick to what it knows works, even if what it knows works doesn't work. So yeah, I'd like to check out some of the later issues of this, like at least through that first run. I want to see what Chris Warner stuff on here would look like, because that is a little bit earlier than his Terminator work. And particularly, I kind of want to see what Larry Stroman's doing here. Although I imagine, you know, in 1985, 1986, Larry Stroman's probably toning it down quite a bit. He isn't going full Stroman just yet, probably. Still, I mean, that's a potentially interesting direction for the book. Anyway, that is going to do it for this one. Thanks very much for watching, guys. If you like this video, please hit the like button. Helps with all the algorithm stuff. If you want to see more, hit subscribe. If you really want to help out, in the description, there's my link tree. You can follow that to my Patreon. Go subscribe there. That'll give you access to everything I do. So all sorts of videos, all sorts of Blood Force comics. You can also follow me on Instagram and DM me there for commissions. But yeah, that'll do it. Thanks again for watching, guys. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.